You're working in the workshop, the phone goes, "Hi, it's John. Can you cut me this size of material and that size of material?" And what happens? You scrap around for a pen that works, can't find a scrap of paper. Does that sound familiar? And you write it on a bit of wood and the wood goes in the fire and you've lost the information. Oh dear. How many years you been doing that? Come on, tackle the job now. Go to any big supermarket, store, garage, they all use till rolls. Speak to them nicely, they'll give you a couple of till rolls, especially if they're misprinted, torn or grubby, and they'll last an awful long time. Make yourself a miniature toilet roll holder using the till rolls. Place it by the phone, make sure there's a pencil handy, not a pen, a pencil, they write vertically. Very simple to write whatever it is you want, and you've always got a copy. If you're drilling a hole, such as a ball bearing, well, you'd have to let it down, of course, but don't hold it in a vise like this. The contact area is too small and it's liable to move. A far better idea: place a nut either side of the bearing. This will greatly increase the surface area. When cross drilling a piece of rod, especially if it's a section of threaded bolt, in order to put a split pin or cotter pin through, the job is made a lot easier if you first put a scrap nut on the bolt and drill through the two of them. If we're machining large section tube using external jaws, we can extend the capacity of the chuck by using sleeves. When using internal jaws, we can use just one sleeve for offset turning. This next tip, well, it isn't so much a tip but a cautionary tale. A colleague I know, he rang me up and he said, I wish my lathe was as accurate as yours, which I thought was a funny thing to say. But seeing as his is much newer, smaller, but you know, much tighter and newer, I'd have thought. So I said, well, if you like, we'll swap. The conversation went quiet for 5 or 6 seconds and it sort of changed a bit. He says, "Is there any chance you can pop over and see if I'm doing something wrong?" I said, "Well, gladly, I'll pop along, but I mean, I'm no expert on lathes or engineering at all. I'm a backstreet mechanicking, and you know, I do my own thing. But if I can help in any way, I will." So I popped along, and I went along with some parallels, some test pieces, a few clock dials, and so forth. And whilst it's never a good idea to rechuck a piece of work because accuracy is lost there are times when this is unavoidable. And but nevertheless, the tolerances just didn't seem consistent, and I didn't immediately know what this would be. I noticed everything was tighter on his machine, which I thought was a good thing. Pretty much everything here has got a load of slap and free play and backlash, but I make allowances for that. But his machine was all new to me and some very tight, and I didn't realise how tight well, that's a smaller chuck, how tight his action of a chuck was, which should have given me a bit of a clue. Anyway, we did a few parallel tests and it didn't seem too bad. But I was concerned how tight the chuck key was turning. In mine, you can just spin it, you know. But his was quite tight. And I said, "When did you last take the jaws out and clean all the muck out of the jaws and out of the scroll?" And he says, "Well, don't think I have." I said, "Well, that wouldn't be a bad idea." So he took out the jaws, cleaned out the scroll, and re-oiled them and put them back, and that was a little bit better. It certainly wasn't right. It was at this point I took the jaws out of the chuck again. As you can see, they're all numbered. That's number 3. That's number 2. And that's number 1. And if you lay them together, you'll see that the tip it doesn't show it that well. Put them there. Right, that's it. You'll see that the tip is a different distance away from the first tooth, if you like, as they're picked up by the scroll. So they can only go in 1, 2, 3. Otherwise it's obvious. But his chuck wasn't marked which position was 1, 2 or 3. And I thought, well, this is extremely strange, and it transpired he'd rubbed them off or done something. So, let's see if I can get the camera to go in there. Will it show it or won't it show it? Can I zoom in? Possibly. I'll bring it around to there. Yeah, that'll do. If I tighten up the jaws, you can see that the scroll turns anti-clockwise. And if we keep continuing, there's the beginning, or the latter part where my finger is, of the pickup of the scroll, or the latter part of it if you like. And this is position 1 on my lathe. So if you take number 1 and go past, place the jaw in its slot, push it up as hard as it will go, and then back off, and you'll feel the jaw go in 1. Tighten up a little bit until the gap comes round to number 2. Here's number 2. Do the same thing with that one. Go past, there it is, it's gone past. Put the jaw in, back off till it drops in 1. Take it up. Go around to the 3rd, come back. There's our 3rd. Keep going. There it is. Drop in the 3rd jaw, push, undo, and it drops in the 3rd one. Now all jaws should be working in sequence. So let's just lock that and wind it up. I've wound it so that the jaws are flush with the outside of the chuck body, and they're all the same, of course. So now, pan back, other way. So now all the jaws are in the position that they were when the manufacturers produced the chuck and ground the jaws to the body of the chuck. Having sorted that problem out, which he didn't seem aware of, we then looked at other issues, and it was the tailstock had been set over a fusel. Wasn't a lot, but it's on every cut you make. And there were several other issues. Let's see if I can point out a few things that overcomes a little bit of slack and backlash on this particular lathe. If there's some operation where the cross slide isn't actually required, I lock it down. And here I've drilled and tapped a hole directly over the top of this guideway. I've made up a nut similar to that, or a bolt should I say, and that goes in the hole, tightens down. And what I've done in the bottom of the hole, I've put a small slug of lead so I don't mark the bed of the guideway. And it's possible to tighten that right down onto the guideway, which absolutely makes that rock solid. There's no way I can move that. That's very handy for when we require more accurate work. Without it, we've got that amount of movement. All these things help. Well, I dare say you guys with CNC digital readout are laughing your heads off at this. But it's done me really proud over the years, and considering it's approaching my age, I'm extremely pleased with it. And the accuracy is good enough, certainly for me. And to do repetitive accuracy, I set up stops like here, and then a micrometer head will drop in between. You give me precise measurements, and the same coming this way. These are of course tightened up when in use. So all in all, I'm pretty pleased with this old gal, and no, I wouldn't swap it. Work holding can sometimes bring its own problems. Take this piston as an example. Say I wanted to machine the top of that piston. Well, I wouldn't put it in a vise because that would distort the thing. What I could do is put it in a multi-jaw chuck and bolt the chuck down to the table. But in this particular case, what I would do, I would utilise the hole in the centre of the table. And here I've got a large eye bolt. Drop the eye bolt into the table, drop the piston on top, and with a bar find the eye bolt, pass it through and put a nut on the bottom and pull the whole thing down, and I can now machine the piston. It won't move. This tip may seem obvious, but I've seen people not know it. If the distance between your chuck or drill bit and the table is insufficient, so you need to raise the head, although the head isn't particularly heavy on this machine, on bigger machines it could be. Why struggle? Why struggle? Simply put a block underneath, undo the clamp that holds the head, pull down on the handle as far as you want, tighten up the clamp, you've now got a greater distance. If you have a small circular saw similar to this is pretty ancient, but I like it. Find if you've got all digital readout, calibrated depths of cut on a scale. I haven't got it on this one. I just simply use a depth gauge to determine the depth of cut. But the point of this little tip is, I'm lucky I've got the panel wall saw there. But if I want to cut something larger using the fence and I wanted it wider than this distance, how would I go about that? Well, I've removed that, and if that was the distance or the amount of wood I wanted to cut off, I would add that distance to it. Then do a right angle mark on the wood and put a batten on the wood and turn the wood up the other way and run the batten along the side of the table. If there's a need to cut multiple sections, small sections where your hand's in the way, this is a piece of square section, but it could be dowel or anything. Simply get a piece of wood, cut the depth out you want your dowel. I'm sure you got the idea. You can of course use the same technique for cutting multiple wedges for tenon joints. If you think you have the monopoly on stupid buys, you're wrong. I bought this, I think it's a McAllister from B&Q. I do not recommend them. Pretty rubbishy. But if you've got one, or someone's given you one, they're worth a few modifications. I've done quite a bit to this, re-engineered it, but as I say, I don't recommend them. They use double-edged planer blades that supposedly aren't capable of being reground. That's because they barely go above the drum size diameter to allow for a cut. But the big problem I found, that on the back of the machine there's about a 3/8 half-inch bar held by 2 hex nuts, and it's put there to stop people who've got no idea how much they're loading the motor, and therefore to stop burning the motor out, of taking a too big a cut. Well, you can take a reasonable cut in softwoods, but if you're in the hardwoods, then you've got to take it much easier. If you've got that sort of savvy, I almost hesitate to say this, but take out the bar, and the best thing you can do with it is throw it away. If you aren't confident to have that amount of savvy, forget what I just said.